Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 7:06 on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here as we plow face first into the second half of our program. It's O'Connor and Company. Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. And Julie, I'm really excited about our conversation in 30 minutes. Dan O'Shea, former U.S. Navy SEAL, and he specializes in hostage situations.
Ooh, that'll be good.
We'll find out what he knows about what Hamas is doing right now and what we can do. 8:15, To My Harding, running for Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. And then 8:35, we're going to follow up with Greg Pemberton. He's the D.C. Police Union chairman. We led the show today at 5 o'clock with Muriel Bowser's Get Tough on Crime stance. Honestly, the best Get Tough on Crime stance Muriel Bowser could have is for Muriel Bowser to resign as mayor and actually hand the district over to the House of Representatives for their constitutional oversight. But we'll get to that later in the program. Right now, we're joined by Phil Wegmann. He's the White House reporter for Real Clear News. And thanks for joining us. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So you asked Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday about what we've all seen with our eyes, the rising tide of anti-Semitism on college campuses. Here's how it went.
Is there anything in particular that the administration is planning to do to take this argument to those college students or those younger generations who seem to be open to the idea that there are two sides to this thing?
I don't have anything to lay out on any specific conversations or outreach that the president's going to do to students. As you know, we have an Office of Public Engagement here. We have other offices here at the White House that is constantly engaging with communities, including the young community. I just don't have anything specific.
The young community. By the way, Office of Community Engagement, it used to be the White House Liaison Office, what it used to be called. Barack Obama turned it into public engagement, and basically it was community organizing, and most of that focus is probably on the side of Hamas. Phil, this came in the same conversation that Karine Jean-Pierre pivoted and said, we don't see any anti-Semitism. The real problem is Islamophobia. So what is the coherent message coming out of this White House from your perspective?
So when it comes to Israel generally, President Biden has been pretty clear, and it's that the United States stands with Israel. That was the initial message, and it continues to be their first line. But as we get farther and farther away from the initial terrorist attack, we have seen this administration say two things, and that is that they have urged Israel to show restraint and to prevent civilian casualties, and then also domestically here stateside, they have raised alarm about the possibility of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and urged Americans to be on the lookout for that sort of thing. I think that the frustration among some, particularly in the Jewish community, is to talk about Islamophobia almost right off the bat.
Yeah,
sort of.
Well,
and there could downplay the fact that there was a huge terrorist attack that killed thousands.
And Phil, Rashida Tlaib, a member of the president's political party, the Democrats, she's still on radio. She doubled down yesterday and said that the Israelis bombed the hospital, which President Biden said, no, our intelligence says that's not what happened. It would go a long way if the White House were to actually call out a member of their own party and say that this is out of line, what Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar is saying. Have any of the listen, I'm old enough to remember that anything said by any elected Republican, at the county level in Wyoming would then be brought to the president and say, well, do you stand by what that person said? Has anyone asked Karine Jean-Pierre if the president stands with Rashida Tlaib or whether he will disavow what she's been saying?
I'm your Huckleberry. Last week, I asked the White House about some of the statements coming from particularly members of the squad, Representative Bush, Representative Tlaib, who were sort of equating the Hamas terrorist attack with prior actions of the Israelis, and I was very surprised how quickly the White House distanced themselves from those members of Congress. Karine Jean-Pierre told me that the comments were disgusting, that they were wrong, that there are not two sides to this thing.
Okay.
And And I think that we will see in the coming weeks and months ahead, as we continue to follow this conflict, this very postmodern conflict where we're not waiting on dispatches. Instead, we're waiting on footage that people are going to be shooting from their cell phone. We're to see this war, and then all of its tragedy in real time. We'll see if they continue to stand by that. As there's sort of more collateral damage and perhaps as opinion changes on this thing.
Phil, I'm curious about what it was like in the room when Karine Jean-Pierre sort of pivoted over to Islamophobia. Yesterday, the Israeli government showed journalists and photographers some of the footage taken from GoPros and cell phones and other things of the torture and murder of these people in Israel. And these journalists, to see them on Twitter afterwards talking about it, it was very hard to watch. And so I'm just wondering, I know many of you probably in that room had seen that footage. What was the reaction in the room among journalists? Because, you saw people even on Twitter saying, did she understand the question? It was so strange. So if you could kind of give us an insider peek and how people reacted.
I think the reaction was a bit muted. All of us are taking notes. We're planning our next story, the next phone call that we've got to make. Honestly, that was a moment that I missed until afterwards, after I was going through the transcript when I saw some of the initial coverage. Because this administration, they've been pretty straightforward. The president is, says the United States, stands with Israel. He sent 2 aircraft carriers to the region, and there always has been sort of this warning not to take it too far. We heard that from Biden in the Oval Office when he talked about not repeating the mistakes of the 9/11 era. But this certainly, we'll see if the press secretary reacts to this at today's press briefing, if she walks it back a bit. But that was very surprising.
Well, and I'll just say, there has been a weird shift sort of in the last 24 hours with Joe Biden actually tweeting out, as Americans, we must come together and reject Islamophobia and all forms of bigotry and hatred. That, and, sort of there's no place in America for hate. So there's been this sort of weird shift. And so, yes, you're right.
It's definitely the messaging. It's definitely the messaging. And here, just to remind everybody what she said yesterday.
We have not seen any credible threats. I know there's been always questions about credible threats. And so just want to make sure that that's out there. But look, Muslim and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks.
It's that pivot that was so odd, to go right from the question about anti-Semitism. But the real problem. So Phil Wegmann, Real Clear News, the latest now is that the president's floating the idea of adding border security funding and linking that along with Ukraine, along with Israel. That seems pretty cynical. Is that going to fly in the Senate or the House?
We saw Minority Leader Mitch McConnell signal his approval for linking Ukraine and Israel aid. Border security funding may be sort of a sweetener. It certainly sounds like the president would be giving conservatives something that they want. But the argument from conservatives and Republicans who are pretty hawkish on this issue is that it's not a question of funding for border security. It's a question of enacting the laws that are already there. And certainly, I don't have to tell you guys, just the numbers are pretty astronomical in terms of border crossings this far. And, the Republican argument is that Biden has no idea who is already in this country illegally.
Yeah. Phil Wegmann, Real Clear News. Always appreciate the good work. And thanks for being our Huckleberry, by the way. I'm going to tell my buddy Chris DeGaulle he misses you, and I don't want him to get jealous. He knows how you feel. Thanks, Phil.
Every time
I know. I love it so much.
Wait, hold on. That's not true. We went a couple of times without bringing it up. I just thought I'd sort of just remind people. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, guys.
It's 7:16. Let's get straight to Jamie Whitten from the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
Later this morning on the Chris Plant Show, crime is out of control in Washington. The mayor says we might start enforcing some already existing laws. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
It is time for Critter News here on
Thank
this
goodness.
critically important news cycle on the 24th day of October. You remember we were captivated by this story. Really, the whole region, the whole country was captivated by the story of the missing zebras in Upper Marlboro, Prince George's County.
There'd be sightings.
Yes, they're the zebras.
And then they'd run away.
We talked to the couple who were sort of harboring the zebras. They were feeding them and caring for them. But then they would, zebras are going to do what zebras do. They're going to be off, doing their thing, and then they'll come back. And you can't keep zebras down, right?
Yeah.
And
this was during the pandemic, so it was a nice diversion.
Exactly. It was like the Tiger King's documentary on Netflix,
right? Without the missing bodies. Whatever.
Without the mutilation and all the gay. But yeah, so the zebras. So we had the missing zebras, and there were zebra sightings. We finally found that actually it ended in tragedy, if I remember. One of the zebras.
One died.
One of the
one
zebras
died, which is terrible.
Didn't go well for the zebra.
Yeah.
Well, that was summer of 21. So it's over 2 years ago. And now we're learning.
Oh, no.
Now we're learning that Jeff Bezos' Washington Post has been doing a 2-year deep dive investigative expose on the guy who owned the zebras in the first place.
Oh, God.
I kid you not. There's this the headline, "Runaway Zebras Delighted the Nation and Exposed Their Owners' Dark Past."
Seriously. Is
Now,
there nothing better to do?
I'm still waiting for the Washington Post deep dive on the Hunter Biden corruption story.
How about a deep dive into myocarditis?
How about the deep dive into how they got duped on Russian collusion?
I don't know. How about a deep dive into Randy Weingarten?
No. There's a whole... It's an exclusive, by the way.
God.
Nobody else was brave enough. And listen, I am suspicious of people who keep exotic animals and stuff.
Of course.
I'm sure there's stuff going on there. But is this really the main priority for the Washington Post, the paper of record here in Washington? Jerry Lee Holly had a long history of violating animal welfare laws, which experts say should have kept him from ever having the Maryland zebras that escaped in 2021. Exhausted by the pandemic's grip in the summer of 21, people were desperate for delight. The dazzle delivered.
Good God.
So basically the tone of this is it's our fault for being captivated by the zebra story.
Exactly.
And we were distracted. But the real story is this person, Jerry Holly, who should
more
have
than
never
1,000 pages of public records were obtained and reviewed by the Post. I mean, imagine
they
your
still won't
journalist
acknowledge Hunter Biden did anything wrong.
For 2 years. Think about for the last two years, what's going on in the world. And you're at a happy hour and you're like, oh, I work for the Post. Oh, cool. What are you investigating? Zebras.
Zebras. I was on the zebra beat. Holly's 78. He's a 78-year-old man. Leave him alone. He owns some land. He's got some money. He wanted some zebras.
It doesn't sound like he's very nice to animals, though.
He spent 50 years operating animal-related businesses. That sounds shady. Including an exotics enterprise with locations in Maryland and Florida. A Washington Post, I guess this is closer to the Tiger King than I realized. He's the Zebra King.
Well, okay, I should take it back. Maybe I was too quick to say. The Post also found that for decades, Holly repeatedly failed to obtain all the permits required by local, state, and federal agencies. Because it's so many, probably.
Yeah,
Can you imagine?
So that's his crime, that he didn't have a permit for the zebras. Well, I mean, that's kind of a victimless crime, isn't it?
Yeah.
Washington Post investigation into Holly's history found that this zebra case will be at least the sixth time he's faced animal-related criminal
are we getting
charge.
to my favorite critter news story?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Come
There's
on.
more. Okay, let's go. Go ahead.
Well, no, you started.
Well, which one's your favorite?
The kangaroo.
Yeah, the kangaroo freaks me out. This is more of a visual, but we'll play the audio of this video, but you have to see it, and we will tweet it out on our X account.
Kangaroos are creepy.
But apparently, this is a thing. Guys will take their dogs. Aussie men will take their dogs out to the outback and have them go paddling.
Australian shepherds.
Right, and they'll swim in the lakes. But kangaroos don't like these dogs, and they'll grab the dog and drown them.
Apparently, this is common in Australia.
And so this guy went up to this kangaroo and wrestled his dog away. And
Hutchie's the one that got dragged into the water. The roo dumped him, picked him up, and then dumped him. I walked about 15 metres out into waist-deep water to
Can you translate this into English for me?
I love it.
You like the accent?
I do.
Right.
To get my dog back. So when I hit it, it was an open hand slap, was what made him let go. And next thing you know, Rue just, the arms went out and he went for me. For me, I've, in a grappling sense, went for a sort of underhook and tried to grab it around the body. We fell sideways into the water. I've turned to run. It tried to grab me. We got out of the water. Part of me is like, oh, I'm going to get you. But then I was like, what's the point? All I wanted was my dog. It was like he was coughing up blobs of water. I've had to give him a bit of a compression type thing to help him breathe.
Yeah, he got dragged under the water. In fact, he did the whole thing with his camera going by the kangaroo. And then when he got up out of the water and he emerged, and there's a shot of the kangaroo standing at him menacingly. It is terrifying.
Honestly, the kangaroo is standing there like a human who's flexing his muscles.
Right,
You
he's
know,
got
like
these...
Yeah, you know, like in competitions where they flex their muscles.
Like Mortal Kombat.
And the kangaroo kind of looks like a human with ears.
Right. It's exactly... No, he looks like an alien is what he looks like. He looks like a menacing,
really
angry
terrifying.
alien. How do we know that kangaroos, and for that matter, every animal that lives in Australia is in fact an alien?
Honestly, you know what? Australia is beautiful, but if you've ever heard about... Well, first of all, kangaroos are terrifying. And secondly, the spiders down there are
every
terrifying.
animal on that island.
Australia and New Zealand.
Koala bears even are awful.
Koala bears are not as cute as I thought.
Terrible beasts.
Well, they bite.
And don't get me started on the platypi. It's just not. It's weird. Everything about Australia is weird. The toilets flush the wrong way.
It is a little. I mean, if you've seen, there's some Twitter accounts that sort of track the bugs in Australia.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, you don't want to go anywhere near down under. But anyway, they're calling it a Rujitsu match, by the way, because he's a Roo.
I do like
in
how
this
they call
fight.
him Roos.
This guy did win the fight,
Yes,
but
his dog is fine.
But he should keep the dog out of the water from now on. By the way, what's the kangaroo doing in the water? I don't know. If it was an aquamarine animal of any kind. I don't want to go anywhere near
bathing.
these beasts. They're awful, awful animals, and that's all I have to say about that.
They really are portrayed as these cute, cuddly things, but
they're not.
Kangaroos are
Don't
dangerous.
mess with kangaroos.
Now on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36 now on this Tuesday morning in the nation's capital. O'Connor and Company on the 24th day of October. Coming up at 8:15, we're going to speak with Tumai Harding, talk about her run for Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. And then at 8:35, Greg Pemberton, he's the chairman of the D.C. Police Union, get his reaction to Muriel Bowser's. Muriel Bowser's decided that crime is an issue here in D.C. It's time to do something about it. Yeah. Before it gets out of hand.
Doesn't she have some sort of job in D.C.? Isn't she an official? Oh, right. She's the mayor.
She's the mayor.
How about that?
We'll find out what she has to say there. All right. So Governor Larry Hogan, he's a Republican, you know.
I heard.
Well, lately he's been flirting with this whole no labels thing, right? Because
Democrats.
The last thing we want is labels. Democrats, exactly.
Right.
I predicted, was it yesterday? Hogan Cheney. That's the ticket. That's the no labels ticket. Hogan Cheney. All right. So Governor Larry Hogan decided he was not going to run for the United States Senate, even though he'd be a shoo-in. He would win for Maryland, and we'd finally have a Republican representing the state of Maryland for the first time in decades.
Right.
And he would have won.
Yep.
He absolutely would have won. It's an open seat, and he would have won. And he would have been in the U.S. Senate. He would have had things, but he didn't. He decided, I don't want anything to do with that.
Because he's more important than the Senate.
I guess he wanted to keep his options open and run for president. So instead, he took... instead of actually representing the people of Maryland and trying to be, at least a saner voice than we will have with a Democrat, should a Democrat win that seat, instead he decided to be a professor at Harvard.
Right. His people.
That's...
I mean, look, when you compare Youngkin and Hogan and what the two governors did in their respective states and sticking up for parents, I mean, I think about Bethany Mandel coming on here talking about how insane Montgomery County was. Yeah. And some of our other guests from Maryland talking about how insane Maryland was. And he was quiet pretty much the whole time. Yeah. So I think it's best that Larry Hogan has gone up to Harvard. However,
here's the news now. He accepted a fellowship to the Kennedy School of Politics and the Chan School of Public Health at Harvard. I like the public health part of it.
Public health, yeah.
Considering how he conducted himself during COVID.
Yeah.
But he just put out a letter to Harvard telling them thanks, but no thanks. He says because of the rising tide of anti-Semitism that was accepted by the administration at Harvard, he said, take your fellowship and cram it. And he does deserve some acknowledgement for doing that. In fact, more people who are affiliated with Harvard should do that. Nothing's going to change until more people affiliated with Harvard do that. So good for Governor Hogan.
Okay.
That said,
can we be done now?
Yeah.
Because look at what I love that he accepts a fellowship in the School of Public Health after what public health did to Americans over COVID, right? Basically shaming us about masking, shaming us about vaccinations, lying to us, throwing people off Twitter for saying things. And, that wasn't a problem. So
Right.
he could have rejected this offer from Harvard because they were all in it.
Well, and that's sort of where I'm sitting, setting aside that you're right about the public health aspect, certainly. But he writes in his letter, I cannot condone the dangerous anti-Semitism that has taken root on your campus. The horrific terrorist attack was the greatest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, and it should be universally condemned as exactly what it is, pure evil. That's right.
Good.
And he deserves some credit, but not a lot of credit, because here's the thing. Where has he been? We've been seeing this for years, if not decades. This has been going on college campuses, especially at Ivy League college campuses.
Especially at Harvard.
Guess what, Governor Hogan? While you were governor of Maryland, it was happening at the University of Maryland, and you didn't do anything about it. All of this, all of the pandering to the intellectual elite on our college campuses that one does when one takes a fellowship at Harvard is what allows the anti-Semitism to fester and grow. We've been calling it out for years. So I'm glad he gets it. I'm glad it took this attack for him to get there. But I also don't want to give him too much credit, because I think those of us who have seen it for the last couple of decades deserve a little more credit because it didn't take a terrorist attack murdering over 1,000 Israelis and the reaction that was eventually to come. It didn't take that for us to see what was wrong.
Higher ed in this country has been garbage for a lot of years. This is nothing new. I am so glad that people are waking up to this, but it is hard to suddenly seal clap for Larry Hogan when many of us have been warning about this for years. And now when you see this activism on college campuses where they're saying, look, oppressed people, yay Palestine, yay for Hamas, for finally acting out. I mean, this is DEI in practice. This is this whole idea of putting people, sorting people into the oppressed and the oppressor classes. This is it in action. And so when many of us were warning against how these DEI programs and this anti-racism is going to create a society where this kind of violence against the Jewish state is allowed and welcomed and praised, we were mocked. Yeah. So, look, I'm glad Larry Hogan, it was really too bad that it took this massacre in Israel to get people to wake up.
President of Harvard, Claudine Gay, by the way, was asked by The Hill, who wrote up the story, to comment on this. She eventually gave them a statement. She didn't immediately respond to the request for a comment, but she did put out a statement on October 9th. And in the statement, while 30 student organizations from Harvard took the terrorist side, she said this: let me state on this matter, as on others, that while our students have the right to speak for themselves, no student group, not even 30 student groups, speaks for Harvard University or its leadership. We will all be well served in such a difficult moment by rhetoric that aims to illuminate and not inflame. Nowhere in there did she say the simple words, they are wrong.
Yeah, I love how it takes the massacre of Jews to get this woman to say something about to stick. It's so perverse how she uses this as the reason she finally wakes up to the First Amendment, and people can be wrong and say whatever they want.
But now Hogan doesn't have his gig at Harvard. Yeah, and he's got time on his hands, and it's too late for. Well, is it too late for him to run for Senate? I guess he could still. Ben Cardin's seat is not up till November of 2024. But he's running for president instead. Yeah, because that'll get him more airtime on CNN.
You think it's Cheney? I think it might be Romney.
Ooh, no,
Romney.
Yeah, Romney wouldn't take the vice presidential slot. Second to Hogan, he was at the top of the ticket and lost.
He's looking for a job. He's bored.
We'll see. It's 7:44. Well, I don't know what to do. It's like every single time I embrace a candidate, they tend to spiral down. You know that I started this presidential election season with Asa fever, because I thought Asa. Why are you laughing? I thought Asa Hutchinson was the answer to all of our needs,
all of our problems.
And I think his campaign is suspended now. That's how they like to. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to suspend it for a little bit
temporarily.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll come back. Yeah.
And then Will Hurd, I thought had the answers. I thought he was my man. Will Hurd fever, as they say. Mm-hmm. And he's now this. And now this
latest bad news.
Perry Johnson.
Who?
That'd be Perry Johnson. So Perry Johnson's a guy who was running for president.
Yeah, you might want to back this up a little bit.
Perry Johnson is a human being, an American citizen, naturally born, as far as I know. And he was running for president for a little while there. He had these ads. Did you see he had a lot of money. He spent a lot of money on ads.
Now I'm starting to remember.
That they ran on cable news a lot. And I remember at one point, an ad was playing here in the studio while we were doing show prep. And I said, take a look at this Perry Johnson ad. Doesn't this look like an AI creation of a candidate?
Yeah, I remember this.
Like show me an old white guy running for the Republican nomination, and AI comes up with Perry Johnson.
Got to bring race into it.
Well, I'm just saying. Anyway, he has suspended his campaign officially, so my Johnson fever is gone. Why is that funny? I had Johnson fever for a little while.
Yeah, I'm looking
it's
at his
behind
Twitter.
me now.
I'm looking at his Twitter picture. He's very happy.
And he has decided to endorse Donald Trump.
Well,
he's throwing his weight behind Donald Trump, which could very well be the difference maker for President Trump now getting the nomination. He's got the Johnson vote.
That's right.
There you go.
There you go.
Meanwhile, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, as we told you yesterday, is already making a significant dent in Joe Biden's numbers in national polling, he has now raised more money in the last fundraising period than any other candidate. He raised more money than Trump. He raised more money than Biden.
Wow.
He raised more money than DeSantis. And apparently it's not just a big money donors. He's got a considerable number of small money donors who are really supporting his grassroots campaign.
He has an appeal. He really does. If you've seen RFK talk, he just, especially when he went up to Congress, and it was so funny because they all tried to shut him down. All the Democrats tried to shut him down. Tried to even cancel the hearing. He just has this appeal. He has this just electric personality that really does attract people.
A lot of people like him. He's very plain spoken.
He's nuts.
Let me just be clear. We don't want him anywhere near the White House unless it's to honor his uncle's passing.
Fine.
Who was assassinated. Yeah. Or his father's, for that matter.
Right.
He raised $8.7 million in the third quarter. And according to the Federal Election Commission reports, the donors are a wide range of professionals from across the entertainment industry, as well as internet media influencers, but also just Mom and Joe America. There's a good number. Now, he's not going to raise enough money to compete, I wouldn't think, but he's also going to get a lot of free media, too, because he's a Kennedy, for crying out loud. And also, I think that the more he stays in it, the more it hurts Joe Biden. Because look, they talk about, significant number of artists and entertainment industry professionals from California. They're not voting for Biden.
A self-employed synergist from Texas donated $3,400.
Or excuse me, I apologize. They're not voting for Trump. These are all people who were not going to vote for Trump.
Right.
They were going to vote for Biden if that was the only choice. Now they can say, oh, well, I kept it real and I voted for Kennedy. Fine.
Yeah.
That's not going to hurt the Republican.
Yeah,
Whoever the Republican
other major
nominee
givers
is.
are several spiritual counselors and energy healers. Yeah, those are super MAGA people.
Oh, my gosh. What will Marianne Williamson do now without that support? It's